Hello again everyone, welcome back to the channel, Comic Kid here, and today we will be looking at the best Daredevil stories. This is my personal list, and I tried to keep it down to like my absolute favorites. I do have some places to start with him as well, but these are the ones that I'd consider to be the absolute best. And I narrowed it down to my top 6, and it was still kind of hard to do, but these are like easily the ones that I'd have absolutely no problem rereading or recommending to anyone else or the like. And that's usually what I try and go by, is like how much would I reread this book and so on. But that's the topic for today, and we will go ahead and get started. So first up is Daredevil, The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. This one is a great origin story for Matt Murdock here. Actually, if you've seen the Netflix show, which most fans of Daredevil have, the show pulls a lot from this book. You see the early days with the black costume, where it's just like the mask over his face. It skips over the yellow stuff entirely, but it does give you a pretty good introduction into all of Daredevil's cast. You see like Foggy Nelson, you do see Elektra, you do see Kingpin, and so on and so forth. So if you are looking to start with Daredevil, this is a great one. If you're looking for just a great Daredevil story in general, then this is also that. I know not everyone is a huge fan of John Romita Jr.'s art. I personally think it suits Daredevil very well, but I do think his older stuff is a lot better than his newer stuff as well. And this isn't a super old story, but it's also not too new either. And next up, we have another origin story with him in Daredevil Yellow. This is part of Marvel's Color books, all of which were written by Jeff Loeb and illustrated by Tim Sale here. If you guys have seen any of my Spider-Man videos, you know I talk about Spider-Man Blue a lot. I absolutely love it. Daredevil Yellow is also phenomenal. So I would say they are very similar to each other. So if you've read one or the other, chances are whichever one you read first is the one you prefer. But that doesn't stop either of them from being great. Daredevil Yellow kind of shows how Matt Murdock transitions from being Matt Murdock to becoming Daredevil, while also, establishing his law firm with Foggy, and developing his relationship with Karen Page especially. This is a lighter take on the character. Nothing too drastic or dark goes on in this book, so if you like that version of Matt Murdock, this one will be great. But I know a lot of people definitely prefer like a Matt Murdock who just kind of keeps getting kicked and keeps falling further and so on. But if you're looking for a more lighthearted take on Matt Murdock, you don't want anything like too dark or gritty, or if you're looking for like a younger fan who's wanting to start Daredevil, this would be a great place to start with that. Next up is Daredevil Guardian Devil by Kevin Smith. This one, again, isn't really a place to start with Daredevil. It is pretty easy to jump into though, like you just have the, this is basically like all you need to know as far as this story goes. And I will caution you guys, I am about to spoil a major thing from the book that makes it so great, so if you want to avoid spoilers, then here's your chance to skip ahead in the video. But this book is famous for being the death of Karen Page. Following her return, Karen comes to find out that she has HIV, and so Matt's kind of dealing with that, and just the more they come to interact with each other, the more things that happen to Matt. Eventually, an encounter with Bullseye is what kills Karen. This was such a big deal because Karen was always like Matt's biggest love at the time. He was always on and off with her and always on and off with Elektra, but this was a major like milestone in Daredevil. Aside from that event though, the rest of the story is actually pretty good. And while Kevin Smith isn't always known for writing the best comics, he is known for his Daredevil, especially Guardian Devil in particular. The man really knocked it out of the park on this one. Righty, next up is Daredevil Born Again by Frank Miller once again. This is kind of the ultimate Daredevil gets knocked down and gets back up story. Essentially, after Karen Page sells his identity to the Kingpin just for drugs, Daredevil kind of has to bounce back from a massive personal attack made by the Kingpin. What's interesting about this story is that he's actually not even in the Daredevil costume for most of it, but it's still excellent. You see, this is like Matt Murdock gets hit like so many times and he still bounces back. It's just a great look at the character and what he stands for and all that sort of thing. And this is truly like one of my favorites. A lot of people say this is the best Daredevil story. I can definitely see where they're coming from, and I may even agree, it's so good. You even see a lot of other Marvel characters appear. Well, not a lot, but some pretty big names appear, especially towards the end. And any fan of Daredevil should really, really check this out. Season 3 kind of pulls a lot from this story, especially. Of course, it is a loose adaptation, so there is going to be a lot that is going to be different, but this is like the definitive Daredevil story. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you do. Righty, next up is Here Comes Daredevil Volume 1 by Mark Waid. Mark Waid jumped on board following the Shadowland event that mostly revolved around Daredevil, and he really brought a lighthearted sense into Matt Murdock again. Before this, when Bendis and Brubaker were on the books, they just kept beating Matt Murdock down. And while it was all very, very good stuff, don't get me wrong, it was nice to kind of see Matt catch a break. This is, again, a really good place to start with Daredevil, although it's not the best. You don't get an origin story in this, but Mark Waid, as his run goes on, brings a lot of characters back and familiar faces and so on and so forth. So if you are a fan of Daredevil, it's still great. If you like the darker stuff, again, this may not be for you, but that doesn't really stop it from being so great. He actually wrote 2 separate runs of Daredevil, both kind of, or this is the first one here, and it did transition into the other after Marvel rebooted. So there are technically 2 volume 1s with Mark Waid's name on them, but they're all the same series. This is the true first one. And I believe this went up to 7 or 8 before it transitioned. I have most of it in single issues, and so that's why the trade numbers are a little confusing for me. But again, this is awesome. I definitely recommend checking it out, especially if you like the lighter stuff. Now, the last story is going to be Daredevil End of Days. And it's not the last just because I think it's the best, but it's the last because of the subject matter. This is effectively Daredevil's Dark Knight Returns story. Shortly after Matt Murdock's death, another Daredevil starts popping up, and a lot of people are like, is Matt Murdock back? Is this a new guy? And so on and so forth. And it's about Ben Urich following the case, basically. He's trying to find out who this new guy is, if it's a new guy, and so on and so forth. And the reason this is on here ahead of Bendis' other stuff is because it's a great, conclusion to his run. It actually has nothing to do with the rest of it, but it's just a great, send-off for everything Bendis did with the character. Bendis is known for telling a much, darker Daredevil story. Like I said, he just was one of the writers who just kept knocking him down no matter how much he already was down. And just when you thought Matt Murdock couldn't fall any further, he would. And so this is kind of a great conclusion to all of that. It shows that there can still be a bit of light to the Daredevil character. And don't get me wrong, this is still a pretty dark story, especially in certain parts, but it is a good one nonetheless. Alrighty guys, and that's everything we have for today. Thank you guys for watching. Feel free to share, click like, and subscribe, and I will see you all again next week.